Hello, and thanks for jumping into this video. We're going to take a closer look at how you can actually build your own custom chat app solutions using Google Apps Script. Now, hopefully you're already familiar with Google Chat apps and the power they can bring both users and teams to really work in compelling ways straight from Google Chat. The great news is for you, the developer, they're actually not that complicated to build. We're going to follow along with an existing code lab, one that you can get available at the address you see on your screen. So this chat app is actually going to be one that folks can use to either call in sick or to take a vacation day. And so it's a great use case when you think about it. If somebody wants to, right from within chat, let their team know what they're doing. Say, I'm going to be out today or on vacation. Let your managers, your colleagues, your coworkers know, as well as you can interface with any back-end system as well too through that. So it's a great user experience to get something as mundane as calling in sick or taking a day off done easily. The great thing about the fact that we'll be building this in Google Apps Script is you can easily connect to other services around Workspace that allows you to take advantage of the way people work. So for example, we're not only going to acknowledge that you've called in sick or taken a vacation day, we're going to set your out of office vacation responder in Gmail, and we're going to put an entry on your calendar letting folks know that you're not available for the rest of the day. So we'll show you how you can do those nice integration pieces. Before you get started, remember, if you're going to do this on your own, and I do encourage you to walk through the steps yourself, you will need a Workspace account that's on a domain, not a Gmail consumer account. You also will need access to a GCP project. Again, watch the video if you don't have those, but if you want to build it, note you're going to need those things. If you want to review this code closer or even build it yourself, you can definitely do that. Right from inside the code lab, you can actually download the source code, or of course you can take a look at it on GitHub, where it's under our Google Workspace projects. It's called Hangouts-Chat-Apps-Script-Code-Lab, and then you can download it or open it with a GitHub desktop or look at the code right there, whatever you like to do best. And let's get started. So step 3 is where we're going to really get busy here and start to build this chat app. So a couple things we're going to do here real quick. We're going to create our project in AppScript, get that set up, and then we're going to explore what events can do inside of chat. And then we'll take that code and we'll put it into our project and we'll get started with it. Okay, so if you are familiar with AppScript, you know you can go and say script.new and kick off a brand new project and get started immediately. If you're not new with it, I recommend going to script.google.com where you can see all the different ways you can interact with AppScript. The beauty of AppScript is it's simply a part of Workspace. There's nothing to set up, just follow those URLs. So to get started, one thing I'd recommend if you're going to be building chat apps in the future, if you go under the Get Started tab, you will actually see, if you scroll down, you can create add-ons and web apps, and at the very bottom, a chat app. So I can actually create a chat app which will have the event handlers already stubbed in and have the project already set up for me to work with Google Chat. Now we're going to start from scratch because A, the code lab does, and B, it'll help you understand a little better how all these things work. So let's just scroll back up and let's create a brand new project. So to get started, the very first thing we want to do is we're going to want to name our project. And we're going to call it Attendance App. Now you'll probably notice in the code lab they refer to it as Attendance Bot. The term bot was used more commonly when that code lab was written, when this technology was first invented. But these days we really see these as more full-featured applications. And so we've kind of rebranded it with the term app. So I'm going to continue to use the word Attendance App, although once in a while I may forget and actually say bot. I've done that quite a few times. Anyway, so the next thing I can do is I'm going to take the code that we already had in step 3 and just remove the old function, and then I'll just paste that in. And let's talk about this code a little bit. So there's 2 main events that your app will interact with the chat API each time your app is either added to a space or a direct message, or it's removed from one. So added to space, as it sounds like, is every time that your app is summoned by a user, you will get an event that lets you know things like who the user is, what the space is, give you a timestamp on when it happened, so you can actually handle that in an appropriate way. The most common way for something being added to space is to respond to the user and acknowledge that they've added your app and let them know what your app is going to do. So you can see here, we have the ability to come in and determine, first of all, is this a DM by looking at the space type? And you can see, we're looking to see if it's a DM. If it is, we display the user's name, which we also get back from the event. If it's not a DM, that means it's either a space or a group conversation, and then we just reply back to the generic name that's passed with that. And then there's the onRemoveFromSpace event, which is a little unique because you really can't interact with the user once you've been removed, because obviously your app is no longer a part of that space or that direct message. But what you can do as a developer is use it to do things like log the event that you've been removed. Maybe you want to do some metrics or evaluations or set up a notification. It's great to know that on the way out, you can also get that event. Okay, so that said, we've got our events ready to go. Let's save this code and let's get ready for step 4. So in step 4, the first thing we're going to do is publish our application, and then we're going to test it to prove that it works. Now there's quite a few steps to get published here, but they go pretty fast. So that said, let's switch back to our AppScript project and take a look at how we can make this work. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to let AppScript know that we intend to run this as a chat app. And this is fairly straightforward. What we need to do is go into the manifest file. And again, if you're familiar with AppScript, you know under project settings, we have a manifest file that does not show by default. We simply say, let's see that. We go back to our file list, the editor. Now you can see that the manifest, this JSON file is available to us. We simply open that up and let's go in and we're simply going to say, this is a chat app, and it's a really straightforward way to do it. We simply say chat. We don't even pass any values to it. We simply say, this is a chat app. I just like to format that and then save it. And that's all we need to do on this side of it. Now what we need to do is we need to actually go to GCP and create the project that we're going to associate with to make this work. Okay, so a little bit behind it. So back in settings, by the way, you'll notice by default, an AppScript project uses a default cloud project. Well, we need to use a dedicated one that we can enable with the chat API. So in this case, we need to assign a specific GCP project to it. So we're going to do that now. And there's just a few steps we need to go through, and then we'll come back here and we'll assign that number. So that said, let's jump over to GCP and create our project. Okay, here we are on the Cloud Console. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. One of the things I like to do to make it really super fast and easy is simply go console and then project create. So I can come off and create one real fast and also make it pretty streamlined. You can see here, I can take the default name. Now your organization may have a best practice or a pattern you use, or you may want something that's a little more identifying. But in this case, because it's a code lab, I'll just take the default name, and then I'll assign a billing account to it. And then I'll say create. Okay, so here's our new project. Let's dive into that. And note, before we actually go back to AppScript and take this project number with us, we do need to configure the OAuth consent screen. So we'll come under API and Services, OAuth consent screen. We'll say this is going to be an internal app because we're not going to publish it to the marketplace. That'll make this process a little faster. We say create that page, put our app name in, and again, we'll stick with our attendance app. We need to put in a support for anybody to contact us. So I'll just put in my email, and then let's pick a logo. You can pick any logo you like. In this case, I'm going to pick one I just have on my desktop that is obviously based on chat. And then finally, again, we'd have to fill this out in full if we were actually broadcasting this to the marketplace and using it externally. But since we're just in the code lab and doing it for internal purposes, I'm going to put in my contact info just in case here. And save that out. Okay, so back in the dashboard, for my project. I'm just going to again grab that project number because this is the number we need to associate with our AppScript project so they can actually recognize each other. So I'm just going to copy that out. We will go back to AppScript. And again, we'll change that project from here. We'll add it and set that project. And we are almost done. So the next thing we have to do is publish our AppScript project. Again, so the chat API knows how to interact with it. So we're going to come up here and we're going to say deploy, new deployment. Now, just one thing of note, if you're taking the code lab and you're going through and reviewing the text as you watch this video, you'll do it separately on your own. You'll notice it used the old IDE version 1. This happens to be version 2. So this section is a little tiny bit different, not a lot, but just something you should be aware of when you go forward. Again, using the new version is probably better, especially as of this writing, we're looking to retire the old version. So anyway, that said, I'm going to actually create this new deployment. I'll call it my code lab. You can call it anything you'd like. You say deploy. Now, I want to copy this number. And again, we're going to put this and associate this with our project on Google Cloud Platform. So I say copy, and then we go back over to Google Cloud. And then the next thing we need to do is enable the Chat App API. To do that, you can come up under the menu. You can say API, enable API and services. We get to the library. We will pick chat out. And a couple of entries come back, dialog flow comes back, and you can see here's the chat API. We'll pick the chat API, and this will, once enabled, bring us to the settings for the chat API, which all we have to do is go in and configure it. I can see some of the traditional things that I could with any other API, but really the only thing that I'm concerned with right now is the configuration section. So once we get into configuration, some of the same things that you would expect to have to fill out, like we've seen with the consent screen, are things like the app name. And we need to give it a URL so that users can visually recognize the app. I'm going to hold off on this 1 second because I already have that very long project ID in the clipboard and I don't want to lose it. So I will go put that in and then we'll come back and we'll add this URL. We need to give this a description. Let's see, let's call this the AppScript Code Lab Chat App to keep along with what the Code Lab does. And let's move along. And again, we won't forget that we need to get that URL for an image. But before we do, let's choose the functionality that our chat app will respond to. So you've got a couple choices here. You can allow your application to be accessed directly by a user or a direct message. The neat thing about that is it's really interesting for scenarios where you want to use chat as a way to folks to reach out to your application, whether it's to pull in information or create or take execution on actions. It's not a team conversation or a team collaboration. It's really one-on-one, your user with your chat app. And so that's a great way of bringing functionality to individual users. However, if you're in chat, you probably also want to make it available for teams to collaborate around. So I'm also going to enable my chat app in this case to work with spaces and group conversations. Most likely, you'll probably do both, but there are some use cases where you may do one or the other, and you have that flexibility. Then next, you can see where I can log errors to cloud logging if I have some errors I may want to trap, which is a good practice there. And then here is where I actually set up the connection so my project can find the chat API. Again, we're going to simply choose our AppScript project. We're going to take that super long number and then we'll just paste it in. Okay, so now let's just go back and we will add that character. So let me go back to the code lab and pull out that URL that we want to use. I copied it and I pasted it in. A few other things down the bottom before we save this. Notice you can add some features that weren't available when that code lab was actually written. Things like slash commands and link previews. These are both powerful interaction tools that allow you to really change the user experience. So I would definitely take a look at these beyond the code lab. And then finally, I need to set their permissions. So for example, if I was rolling this out to everybody in my organization, I would check the everyone box. But since it's just me in a test environment, again, I will come through here and I will just make it available for myself. And then we're going to save this off. We can go over to chat and actually test this out. So let's open up a new window for chat. And let's add our app to a direct message by hitting the plus up by the top by the chat on the other direct messages. We're going to say find apps and let's look for our attendance app. And you can see that it's now registered and it's available to discover. And it's the third one down here on the list. If we say add that, notice again, we can add the space because we actually picked that setting, or we can direct message it. Let's direct message it. And now you can see we added the app to chat and the event, the on-add event fired, and we got a response. So the great news, we got step 3 and 4 to work pretty quickly. Now let's do something interesting and move over to step 5, where we really start to see this app come to life. What we're going to do in step 5 is actually start to respond with cards. In step 4, you saw responded with plain text, which is okay, but cards allow a much richer visualization with the option to add interactivity into your chat application. And so cards give you both that nice look and feel, as well as structure, as well as the ability to take action on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the code here. Again, we're going to put it back into our AppScript project, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So let's copy this, and let's take it and put it in our AppScript project. Okay, so here we are back in AppScript. So let's just make a little space here at the bottom of our project with a couple of lines. And then let's blast that code in, and then let's talk about it. So here we are. The very first thing in the new code that you see is the first thing it's doing is it's setting up our header for our card to send back. Now, again, what we're going to do is assemble the components of a card and put that in the response of our message instead of text. So in this case, you can see we're setting up the header, we're putting the title in, attendance bot, the subtitle, log your vacation time, and then we're passing along a default URL so folks can recognize this is the application they're working in, which makes it a little more user-friendly. Okay, so now the next thing we're doing is we're finishing off that card response with another function that's allowing us to add sections in it with some widgets that we contain. Now, there's a bunch of different widgets available, right? Everything from text, buttons, images, key pairs, things like that. You can put whatever you want back, or including just plain text like we're going to do here. So the on-message event is the most important event associated with chat apps. It's fired every time a user interacts with your chat app. So if a user app mentions it, if a user chats to a direct message with it, or if a user shares or uploads a file or even blasts in an image, you'll get a message that has a payload of the information about what the user included, who the user is, where the space was, an ID back to it so you can even add back onto it or respond to them. A lot of information in the payload that you can do something with. In this case, we're doing a real simple response where all we're doing is taking the event, we're taking the text out of it. You can see event.message.text, and then we're simply replying back as an echo back to the user. But the cool thing here is, again, we're going to wrap that in a card, so you'll see that it has more structure, and then we're adding that card back up into the header, so you'll see it'll be a nice response. So that said, let's save this, and then let's go test it. So we're going to save it. And again, because we're in the new IDE, we do need to manage this deployment by just spinning off a new version since we're not working on the head version. So we'll just say new version here. It's not a big issue to do that. Makes it pretty easy. We just save that out and let's go test it. So we're back in chat and we're simply going to say hello this time. So you can see the response. We can see at the top, we see the header with the image, with the log your vacation time in it. We could also see the widget section at the bottom with the text in it that responded that I said hello, and it lets me know that that's in fact what I said. That said, that's kind of interesting, but what we really want to do is add some interactivity and bring this application full circle. So let's move on to step number 6, where we can actually add some buttons and really create an application here. So here we are now in step 6, where we're going to take a look at wrapping all this together by adding interactivity to our chat app. The final event that we're going to explore is the on-click event. Now, the on-click event, we can do a couple things. We can open a hyperlink and take the user somewhere else, or we can run code in our AppScript project, which allows them to take some additional actions based upon what they'd like to do. And so in this case, we're going to set the vacation reminder in Gmail out, and then we're going to block out a day in their calendar and let folks know they're out of the office, but we're going to let the user choose that because maybe they don't want one or the other, or maybe they want both. We'll take a look and see how this can work. So here we are back in AppScript again. And this time we're going to actually not just append to the end, we're going to remove the onMessage event and put a slightly more sophisticated version from what we copied from the code lab. So let's just delete that out. I'll make a few spaces here and blast it in. And let's take a look at that. Okay, so if we get back to the onMessage event this time, you'll see a couple things. First of all, we've added a variable on top. So we can capture if the person is out sick or out of the office as a parameter and display that back to them or include that in our logic. We're coming in and we're capturing the reason. We're picking up the person's display name. We're also pulling any of the text out of that event because we want to actually search and see if they mentioned I'm sick or I'm on vacation or whatever the use case may be. We want to be able to handle that appropriately. So we're just going to parse it out. This also is a good time. Again, if you're forward thinking when you're doing this code lab, you could also use a / command to make this a nice experience. As well, you could even make it fancier and hook this up to something like Dialogflow if you really wanted to make it a full conversational chat app. With that said, real simply easy here. We are looking for an instance of sick. If we do, we're going to send back a little sick image. If they're not sick, we'll assume it's on vacation. We'll check for vacation, and we'll send back the happy I'm on vacation icon instead. Then we're going to start to build out a more sophisticated card, and you'll notice a couple things, mentioning you're taking time off, a nice pleasantry, but here's where it gets really interesting. We've got a couple of buttons that we're going to add. So the first button is going to be to set the vacation in Gmail so you get that out of office response automatically. So the way it works, we declare the button, we create an on-click event, and we pass the parameter and the action method name to it. Here in this case, we're going to run another routine called turn on autoresponder, and then we can actually pass that value in as well too. Same thing for calendar. We're going to create a second button. This one's going to be something that they can click block out a day in their calendar. And again, we're going to run an action method that is called block out calendar and pass that reason in, and then create the card and pass that card back to the user on the message. So let's save that now and get the next block of code, which is going to help us handle the card clicked event, which will allow us to take the user responses and then take the appropriate action. So let's grab that code and go back to AppScript with it. So at the bottom, I'm just going to blast that in and let's take a look at that code. Okay, so again, here's where we handle event on card click. Here's our event parameter being passed in. The first thing we're going to do is we can actually look at the parameters being passed in and get the reason. Then we can also determine which one was actually clicked. So for example, if the user clicked turn on autoresponder, we're going to then run the turn on autoresponder function and then pass in that reason, as well as we're going to respond back to the user that we turned on the vacation settings. However, if they clicked on the block out calendar, then we'll actually capture that, respond with a different message, and of course run a different routine, the block out calendar routine. So again, let's save that and get one final code block from our lab. Now here's where it gets really interesting. We're going to integrate our chat app with Gmail and Calendar straight from Google AppScript. So you'll notice there's not a lot of code here, and there's not a lot we need to do to set this up. A couple small steps, and we'll do them in a second. But first of all, this code will either turn off or on, in this case, the autoresponder in Gmail, or, and if you can believe this or not, one line of code, it will actually create an all-day event and let folks know that this user is out of office. So let's take that code and let's add that code to our project. So we go back to AppScript, we come down the bottom, we paste that in, and that code is ready to go with one exception. Now, a lot of times when there are standard calls that you're making, you can use the Google Workspace APIs to do that natively without doing anything else in Workspace. But in this case, because we are using the autoresponder, that's part of the Gmail Advanced Services API. So we do need to do one slight thing to make this work. So let's save this code. And then note we have to come in and add the Gmail service, both here by scrolling down and finding the Gmail API service and adding it, as well as we need to enable it on the GCP side as well too. Now I will let you know that this link currently is leading us to the wrong place. So I'm not going to click it here, but we'll just navigate real quickly in our project and make that happen. So we'll add that here. Hopefully that'll be fixed by the time this releases. Then we'll go back to GCP and we'll go back to Enable APIs and Services. This time we'll add in Gmail. We'll enable that. And now let's go back to our project. And for one last time, let's go through and manage that deployment and create a new version. We'll say deploy that. We'll say we're done. And then if I don't feel well, I would just tell the chat app that I am sick. And since it's the first time running it, I'll refresh chat. And you can see I have one little step here just for the first time. Since I'm using this for the first time, I need to actually authenticate that. It's going to ask me, do you want this app to see my calendar and my Gmail settings? I say allow. When I say allow, I off that. I go back in. And now you can see I've been able to get the full card back saying, hey, would you like to set vacation time in Gmail and block out your calendar day? Let's just take a look real fast what it's going to do before it does it. We can go into settings and see I don't have my autoresponder on. I can also go into calendar and see I have no calendar events for those days. So let's go back in here and say, set vacation in Gmail. I get a notification. Those settings have been turned on. Let's block out that day in the calendar. Blocked out the day in the calendar. Let's go take a look. If I refresh that page, you can see now my out of office is on. If I scroll down, you can see I'm out of the office today. We'll be back on the next business day. Notice it's been created by attendance bot, which by the way is the old name in the code. And then finally, calendar, out of office, it's created, it's put in there for me automatically, which again makes it super easy. If I don't feel well, saves me a lot of time by taking those steps for me. Step 7, we're at the end. Congratulations, you've made it all the way through. Thanks for listening. There's a bunch more resources up here where you can learn how to do all the things you just saw, or extend it, or take it to the next step, and create some really wonderful chat apps. Thanks for tuning in.